Welcome back to Son of Chelsea. It's Wednesday's edition of the podcast. I hope you're all having a great day so far. We now have official confirmation that João Pedro is a Chelsea player with a pretty nice Brazilian-inspired, as expected, transfer announcement video. We've covered João Pedro a bit on the show already, so we had a great show with Ryan Adset, Brighton fan, got a lot of detail about the player, so go and check that out. There will be more discourse about João Pedro and the new signings, but today's show is about a player we are awaiting the announcement of, and we may have to wait a little bit longer given Dortmund's current participation in the Club World Cup. And that is, of course, Jamie Gittens, another attacker that Chelsea have recruited already this summer. And I was delighted to be joined earlier today by really the voice of the Bundesliga in the UK. I'm sure you have heard many of his bits of commentary around Bundesliga goals, some great Bundesliga moments, and that is Kevin Hatchard. It was great to have him on the show again. We've spoken to him before about the likes of Christopher Nkunku joining, and we delve into, obviously, Jamie Gittens, whether this is a good fit, in his opinion, for the youngster joining Stamford Bridge, obviously playing in the Bundesliga, how he's adapted, how he's grown, some of the struggles he's faced, and whether this is the right move for him amongst a flurry of attacking players under Enzo Maresca and how he fits into that. Also, Kevin Hatchard directly goes for the throat, really, of the famed Bundesliga tax and whether it is a legitimate argument. You'll hear his retort to that, along with other things we delve into regarding this transfer. Please do share the video around with friends, share the podcast around with friends, get involved in the comments below. And as I say, go and follow Kevin Hatchard. I'm sure, as I said, even if you haven't followed him on Twitter, I'm pretty sure most of you, if you've ever watched comps basically of Jamie Gittens or watched any Bundesliga football, you've probably heard and will recognize his voice instantly. So please go and follow his work. Hope you do enjoy the podcast. Let's get to the convo right now.
Here's Gittens. Gittens! Sensational! There's been so much talk of change at Borussia Dortmund, but it's a young star that was already here who has made the difference. Jamie Gittens!
So Kevin, thank you so much for joining me today. Gittens to Chelsea, your kind of initial reaction, do you think it's a good fit for the young winger?
I think it could be, yeah. I think it's probably a deal that helps everyone. Dortmund had decided that he was their most saleable asset for the summer and that they needed to raise funds to do deals elsewhere. And of course, they've already brought in Jude Bellingham, rather. Jude was a while ago. So they've already spent a chunk of cash there, and Dortmund don't have lots of wriggle room in the transfer market. So this was a deal that they needed to do. And I think it became increasingly likely that they would do a deal like that as the second half of the season wore on, because they really struggled under Nuri Sahin. But the irony is, in that spell, Gittens did very well from early on when he got a match-winning brace against Eintracht Frankfurt in a game I commentated on, actually. And he was the most consistent we've seen him in the first half of that season. But when Niko Kovac got there, he has very different demands, very different shape in terms of how he wants to do things. And it became clear that a kind of traditional winger like Gittens wasn't really in his thought process. So they didn't get the money that they wanted to, Borussia Dortmund. But as we know, they're tough negotiators. And I think they're happy with the deal they've done.
There are concerns from Chelsea fans about, again, buying potential, a 20-year-old player. But just, not being an expert on the player, but just looking at what he's done at Bundesliga level, which is a top 5 European league. I mean, it's not, although people can look at the age, the minutes he's played are serious. He's played Champions League football as well. So is that sometimes a little bit flippant to just look at the age of a player rather than their actual experience?
Absolutely. There are guys who've, racked up hundreds of games. I commentated on Vinicius Junior the other night. I mean, he's 24 and he's played well over 300 games for Real Madrid and scored in 2 Champions League finals. Now, look, not every player is going to be Vinicius Junior, but you look at somebody like Florian Wirtz, he's 22, he's just gone to Liverpool, he's got hundreds of games under his belt, and he's played in massive matches, and he's played well in the Champions League. So the age is the start point, but it's not a thing to judge people by. as you guys are going to find out, Estival is a very young player, but he's already done a lot for Palmeiras. So there's an exciting player right there who's had to step up in high pressure circumstances. So I look at him, Jamie Gittens, and think there's definitely potential there. I've seen performances where he's been the best player on the pitch. There was one I particularly liked against Borussia Mönchengladbach where they tried to double team him the whole time, and he eventually escaped that double team and scored a brilliant goal. He's got this thing that I call the reverse Robin, which is him cutting in off the left and hitting that right-footed shot in the way that Robin used to, coming in off the right. And he's definitely got that in the locker. The question's going to be, can he do what Robin used to do and be able to mix it up occasionally to just throw defenders off balance a bit? So I'm not saying Jamie Gittens is on Arjen Robben's level yet, but he has that little trick in his locker. So I think he's exciting. You know, close control's good, tight spaces. He can take people on. He wants to take people on. And he has scored goals in the Champions League as well as the Bundesliga. So considering how young he still is, I can understand why Chelsea have gone for him.
There is a bit of a nice narrative, kind of, I guess you'd call it symmetry here, because, of course, Chelsea had a former Dortmund left winger in, or at least I know he played off the right for Dortmund, but especially last season, Jadon Sancho. And, of course, you know, there was frustration that Sancho wasn't producing enough for Chelsea. And, of course, Gittens coming in and how he's developed. There's always the big question of, like, taking someone from not only a foreign league, but one environment to another, and the pressure and scrutiny in the Premier League, but for Chelsea. In terms of watching players at Dortmund for a number of years that you've seen, and when they do make that jump, whether it be to a Premier League club or another big European club, how ready do you think Gittens is for that jump? Because it's not just on-pitch talent. There's obviously a whole media and kind of pressure landscape that comes with that.
Yeah, it's difficult to say. I mean, there's pressure at Dortmund. You're in front of 80,000 every couple of weeks, and there's pressure to deliver. And I think the one thing he's lacked is consistency, and that hopefully will come over time. I think, you know, I mentioned his Champions League games. There was a game in Milan against Milan where he performed really, really well. That was a game they really needed to win, and they did. And he was a big part of that. So he has shown up in big games. But my question about players going to Chelsea is always the same, in the sense that Chelsea signed so many players and have so much young talent and have stuck slavishly to this system of bringing in young player after young player after young player. That's great to a certain extent, but it makes it harder to adapt, I think, because, you know, are you really... You know, do you have to fight for number one in that pecking order? That's not unusual at clubs, but when there are so many options, so many players, and you do get the sense that players maybe aren't there for as long as they'd like to be. You know, there's players like Madueke being linked with moves away, which I find amazing personally. But so you have to give them a little bit of time as well. And this Bundesliga tax thing is a nonsense. It's a nonsense, because I know what Chelsea fans will say. Well, hang on, what about Timo Werner? What about Kai Havertz? But Kai Havertz scored a winning goal in the Champions League final, so there's that. And Werner played in the same game. But for all of those, Kevin De Bruyne came from the Bundesliga, Erling Haaland came from the Bundesliga, Ilkay Gundogan came from the Bundesliga. So there are players who've come in and performed really, really well coming in from that league. So you have to go on a case-by-case basis. Am I sure Gittens is going to be a hit at Chelsea? No, I'm not. But I do believe he has the natural talent and probably the work ethic to do the job.
Is that kind of, I think there's that nuance within there, right, of not writing off leagues, because Chelsea have had a few bad examples, but there are other leagues we've bought. But I mean, Lukaku, for instance, was from Serie A. He played in the Premier League before. So even if there's all the boxes ticked of logic for a transfer, it doesn't mean it's going to work out.
No,
I think it's more the style profile fit, and that's what I think excites me most about Gittens, because I know earlier you spoke about how things had changed at Dortmund, where Kovac suddenly is not playing maybe a system that suits him. I think absolutely Gittens fits into the idea of a winger that, you know, Maresca likes, you know, very wide 1v1. I think the one thing that Chelsea fans got frustrated with, say, Sancho and even at times Pedro Neto, is because of Maresca's system, they're not going to get the overlapping fullback that other systems provide, so they have to do a lot of work on their own. Do you see with the talent of Gittens that he has the confidence, he has the technique and guile to deal with being as I say, as you mentioned earlier, having two defenders potentially on him on a weekly basis.
Yeah, I think he's probably a better fit than Sancho is. I think with Jadon, he's always needed a fullback outside him. I think if you look at his best work at Dortmund, it was generally with either Rafael Guerreiro outside him on the left or Ashraf Hakimi back in the day on the right-hand side. So he's always needed options and he's always needed runners. And if you don't get that, you take away a lot of the things that are good about his game. Gittens is different. He's a ball carrier. He's a one-on-one guy. I always felt that Sancho beat you with the ball. And what I mean by that is he would beat you with a pass. He would come up with a really, well-weighted pass, something like that. He'd thread a ball through or he'd play a little 1-2, whereas Gittens will try and skip past you if he can. And he can do that. He's able to do that. His long-range shooting is good. He gets real power into the shot. We've seen time and time again, as I mentioned, him come in off the left and bang one into the far corner. So he's got that quality. What I like about him is he does everything at speed. There was a really good example of that in a Klassiker against Bayern when he had a breakaway. He burst away from a defender out wide and then he raced into the space and came up with a really good finish on the run at high speed. That's not an easy thing to do. A lot of players have to slow down and come up with that finish. So that's one of his best attributes, that he's able to do things at high speed.
In terms of the connections that he could have, as you mentioned, a lot of young Chelsea players, so many, it's easy to forget some of them. But are there any in the Chelsea squad that you sort of think, just maybe based on similar profiles at Dortmund, that you think maybe he could fit well with as a wide player in Maresca's system?
Yeah, it's a really interesting one, actually, because I think the one thing he had that was interesting at Dortmund in the season just gone was a reference point as a striker. He had Serhou Guirassy and he had somebody to link up with. So it'll be interesting to see what Chelsea do. Obviously, it'll be interesting to see if Delap can nail down that striker's role and how that changes things. Because a lot of the time, if you've got that classic centre forward, it can free up space to move into. And that's something I think that Gittens would very much enjoy. But in terms of him getting on with people, in terms of his behaviour, generally, I don't think there've been any problems. Obviously, it became clear very early on he wanted to go to Chelsea and he was waiting for that move to happen. And so that's then really difficult for the player because, their head's elsewhere. So, and Club World Cup was difficult anyway. So I think in general, I don't think there'll be a worry about him settling in. Obviously, he's coming back to England, so I mean, there's nothing jarring or unusual there. I think it'll take a little bit of adaptation, getting to the pace of the Premier League to a certain extent. I think as well, he's a transitional player a lot of the time, so he uses that pace in transition. Chelsea do come up against teams that do want to sit in a low block and dare them to play through. So it'll be interested to see how he does with that. But as I say, he can take people on one-on-one, so maybe that'll be useful in that regard. So there's lots of options, lots of potential, but like any signing, not a sure thing. And the one big challenge I think he has is, okay, you can deliver for 20 games. Can you deliver for 40? Can you start regularly stringing together goals, assists, that kind of thing? I think he can do it. It's just that he hasn't so far.
Let's dream up for the benefit of Chelsea fans, kind of a best case scenario for Gittens. I mean, based on what you've watched at Dortmund and as we mentioned earlier, the players that have gone in out of Dortmund, I think it's a really good club for developing young players and then going on to some big things. I wonder, where how high could Gittens go? Do you really think this is someone that could go to another level, or maybe just? I mean, I'd accept a decent level, but maybe is there something more there that people aren't looking at the moment?
Look, I think he could be an England player. I think he can do that. He's not of the level that, say, Bellingham was when he left, Haaland was when he left, even Sancho was when he left. Now, I know people will laugh at that and say, well, look at what's happened to Sancho since. But when he went to Manchester United, he genuinely was one of the most exciting players in Europe. Gittens isn't on that level. That's not to say he can't improve. That's not to say he can't get there. But it's not the kind of deal that had the same buzz when Dortmund shifted those players out for big money. So in a way, that's probably a good thing because that same pressure isn't there. So I think he can develop. I'll be interested to see what the competition for places brings out of him, because he wasn't always a regular starter at Dortmund by any stretch. And obviously towards the end of the season under Niko Kovac, he lost his place. So, yeah, I think he's got to be patient. They've got to be patient with him, and fans have got to be patient. But he's an entertainer, and he's got some quality.
Hopefully, yeah. And I think in some ways it's good that he is a left winger, because that is one area that in the squad, although people look at it on paper and say there's a lot of attackers there, it's actually more weighted to the right side of Chelsea's attack than the left. I think with Mudryk obviously banned at the moment, not going to play for a long period of time, Sancho off, there's interest in maybe George going on loan there. The left side of Chelsea's attack is certainly one that feels kind of still a little bit unsure. So that maybe is a good thing for Gittens as well, is that, you know, if he was another right winger, I'd be more concerned for his play time, because obviously Esteval's coming in, Madueke, there's a bunch of players, Pedro Neto, who can play on that side as well. But thank you so much, Kevin, for taking the time today. I know obviously you said you were commentating as well on the Club World Cup, but known as the voice of the Bundesliga, just a chance for people to go and find your work, and I'm sure excited as well for the new season, because I saw the fixtures came up pretty recently for the Bundesliga as well.
Yeah, good start with Bayern against Leipzig. Looking forward to that. So yeah, at Kevin Hatchard on Twitter, or X, as I suppose we're supposed to call it now.
You can call it Twitter. I'm still calling it Twitter for the rest of my life, to be honest.
Still some games coming up in the Club World Cup beyond Sky Sports News, doing some transfer stuff in August as well. So busy still.
Perfect. Yeah, it's a mad time of the year, but in some ways that makes it pretty positive. So in the comments below, please do give me your thoughts on Jamie Gittens, positive, negative, about his transfer to Stamford Bridge. Also, please go and check out Kevin's work. Links will also be in the description box on YouTube and on the podcast feed as well. So thank you once again for watching. Please do stay tuned for the rest of content this week, obviously building up to Palmeiras in the Club World Cup, that massive game in America. So thank you for watching. Follow at SonOfChelsea, and I will see you again very, very soon. All the best.